Today, since we're going to be talking about Jesus turning water into wine, I need to tell you a funny story. Don't want to. Some of you may know Professor Jim Nestigan. He was one of my professors when I was at seminary, at Luther Seminary. And he used to go out and teach in the local congregations. Well, one time when he was visiting a congregation, a woman came up to him and said, Professor, I understand that some of the professors at the seminary take wine. Apparently, she was not in favor of drinking alcoholic beverages. He said, yes, and you know, Jesus took wine. She said, I know, and I'll never forgive him for that. The story just before our story of the wedding is about Jesus when he went out and he called his disciples, called men to follow him and be his disciples. And one of the people he called was Philip, and Philip told Nathanael. And Nathanael came to check out Jesus, see what it's all about. It says, when Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, here is truly an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit. Nathanael said, where did you come to know me? Jesus said, I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you. And Nathanael said, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Jesus said, Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under a fig tree? You will see greater things than these. Truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and angels ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Or as Bachman Turner Overdrive sang in the 70s, you ain't seen nothing yet. Jesus and his mother went to a wedding. The wine gives out. Mary says to Jesus, they have no wine. And Jesus says, woman, what is that to you and me? How important is wine? How important is it in a wedding? Well, think of Wisconsin without beer. Think of First Lutheran running out of lutefisk. And think about what Dick would be doing. We might say, it's a wedding, let them eat cake, like Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake. Well, I don't know if they had wedding cake in that time, in that culture. In that time, in that culture, wine was very important. Wine signified joy and love and promise and abundance. This fall, my family went to Long Island. It was my niece's wedding. And on Long Island, they had the wedding at the cathedral in Rockville Center. It's not the biggest cathedral, but it's a cathedral. And they had the reception at Glencoe Mansion. It's an old mansion that is converted into a catering hall. I thought the wedding was over the top. At the mansion, after the wedding, they had a cocktail hour, longer than an hour, I think, and they had enough food for an army, along with all the adult beverages. And then after that, there was dancing, a steak dinner, more adult beverages. It was great, but I thought it was over the top. I always encourage young couples when they're going to get married that you don't need to spend a lot of money to have a great wedding, and you don't. However, to my brother and his wife and my niece, this was a very important day. They wanted to share their love and joy and celebrate. And you don't celebrate with scarcity, you celebrate with abundance. My brother could afford it. I guess that's one of the differences. And even, I did say something to my sister-in-law. I said, Deb, you spent a lot of money. And she said, well, this is what money is for. They spent it on their family and their friends in celebration of this great event. I just hope my daughter wasn't paying very close attention to all of this. Mary says to Jesus, they have no wine. And Jesus says, woman, what concern of this is to you and me? My hour's not yet come. Does Mary give up? No. Do you know how a Jewish mother changes a light bulb? So I'll sit in the dark. Or, in this case, she ignores her son's response. Woman, what concern is this to you and me? And Mary says to the servants, just do whatever he says. Now, standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. The number 6 in Jewish thought is an incomplete number. The complete number is 7. Maybe that's why 666 is the mark of the beast, because it's an incomplete number. God is complete. 7 is a complete number. I was thinking, God, in the creation story, we read how God created the world in 6 days and then rested on the 7th day. Some theologians would say, while creation is good, and while at that point God was finished, maybe it wasn't complete yet. God was finished with it, but still is in process with it. That God is still at work in the world and at work on the world. So Mary can say, okay, I'll sit in the dark. Or she can say, ignoring what Jesus says to the ushers, just do what he says. Jesus says to them now, fill the jars with water, and they filled them to the brim. He says, now draw some out, take it to the chief steward. So they took it. When the steward tasted the water turn into wine, he calls for the bridegroom and says, everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine, but you have kept the good wine until now. My brother, I thought, was over the top. But do you know how many bottles of wine Do you know how many bottles of these kinds of wine you would get with 6 jars of 30 gallons? You would get about 1,000 of these. 1,000 bottles of wine on the wall. Don't knock it off. And we're not talking about Mogan David, which we'll be having today. We're not talking about $5 Chuck that you can get at Trader Joe's. This is the good stuff. I looked up, the most expensive wine ever sold was for $122,000. It was a limited edition 12-liter bottle, larger than this, of Chateau Margaux. I think I said that. 2009. I'm sure many of you have had that. The 2 most expensive wines in 2014 was a French red that sold for $8,000, like one of these, right? Not this, but. And a German Riesling for a mere $4,500. So just think, 1,000 bottles of wine costing let's just say somewhere between $8,000 and $4,500. $8,000 and $4,500. And I think the wine that Jesus has was probably better than the Chateau Margaux. Do you think Jesus went over the top? Even if Jesus got the cheap stuff, the German Riesling for only, $4,500, that would be about $4.5 million. Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee. It revealed his glory. One of my professors in seminary said every time you read the word glory in the Gospel of John, translate it to reality or reveal. Jesus is revealing who and what he is. One of my pastors when I was young, his favorite phrase was the reality of the totality. And he would go like this, the reality of the totality. And we didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I believe this is what he was talking about. Jesus is the reality of the totality. Jesus is the wine. Jesus is the good stuff, the abundant stuff, the right stuff. Jesus is the new wine, better than any wine before. And he comes in abundance. So the question is, what does that say to us personally? What does that say to us as First Lutheran in 2016? What does it say to us as we come together in a couple of weeks for our annual meeting? May Jesus bless you. May Jesus bless First Lutheran with the best and the abundant stuff. Amen.